My name is Brooke. I'm 28 and I'm staring at my old suitcase filled with hastily packed clothes. Through my bedroom window, I can see my brother Kyle's brand new car gleaming in the driveway. On my bed sits a rent bill my parents left for me. After years of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the invisible one, I've made my decision. I'm leaving without saying goodbye, but I'm leaving something behind. A note that will change everything. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from, hit like and subscribe to. Join me on this journey of finally standing up for myself. Growing up in the Gardner household, there were four of us. My father, Jason, a corporate lawyer with a stern demeanor and exacting standards. My mother, Diana, an elementary school teacher with a warm smile for everyone except when I brought home anything less than perfect. My younger brother, Kyle, now 22, and me. From the outside, we probably looked like the perfect American family. Nice suburban home, with a manicured lawn, family vacations to Florida every summer, parents who attended every school function. But appearances can be deceiving. For as long as I can remember, there were two sets of rules in our house. One for Kyle, and one for me. I got my first taste of this difference when I was 7. I had worked hard on a school project about the solar system. I stayed up late carefully painting each planet, measuring the distances between them according to scale. When I brought home an A- because I'd forgotten to label Pluto's moon, my father sat me down for a 30-minute lecture about attention to detail. "Brooke, excellence isn't optional in this family," he said, his voice measured and cold. "You're capable of better than this." That same year, Kyle forgot his lines in the school play. Everyone thought it was adorable. My parents took us out for ice cream afterward to cheer him up. As we grew older, the pattern only solidified. When I was 16 and got a B+ in advanced chemistry, I was grounded for 2 weeks. No phone, no friends, just extra studying time. The message was clear. I needed to do better, be better, achieve more. "You need to set an example for your brother," my mother would say, as if my sole purpose was to be a bar for Kyle to reach. Meanwhile, Kyle struggled with basic algebra, and my parents hired him a tutor. When he got C's, they praised his effort. "He's trying his best," they'd say. Math just isn't his strong suit. When he got in trouble for skipping class, they defended him. "He's just finding himself. Boys need space to figure things out." That same year, I got my first job at the local supermarket. Not because I wanted to. I had AP classes and debate team and volunteering at the animal shelter. But because my parents decided it was time I contributed to my own expenses. "You're old enough to start learning financial responsibility," my father announced over dinner one night, as if this was a natural progression and not something they'd never mentioned to Kyle. So while my friends were focusing on college applications and enjoying senior year, I was working 20 hours a week maintaining a 4.0 GPA and saving every dollar I could. Not for fun, things like prom or movies, but for necessities. My own clothes, my school supplies, even my college application fees. Don't get me wrong, I loved Kyle. He was a sweet kid with a quick laugh and an easy way with people. It wasn't his fault our parents created this dynamic. Sometimes, when it was just the two of us, we'd have genuine moments of sibling connection. He'd ask me for advice about girls or help with an assignment, and I'd feel that bond that siblings are supposed to have. But there was always that undercurrent of resentment. Not at him exactly, but at the situation. At the unfairness of it all. At our parents who couldn't see what they were doing. College was when the differences became impossible to ignore. I'd been accepted to several prestigious universities, including my dream school with a partial scholarship. It covered about half the tuition, which was amazing, but still left a significant amount. I'll never forget sitting at the dining room table with my parents' spreadsheets and financial aid forms spread out before us. "We can contribute $5,000 a year," my father said, looking at the numbers. "The rest will need to be loans or additional scholarships." I nodded, already calculating how many hours I'd need to work while taking a full course load. It wasn't what I'd hoped for, but I understood. College was expensive. 2 years later, when it was Kyle's turn, I happened to be home for spring break. I overheard my parents in their bedroom. "We'll cover the full tuition," my father was saying. "He needs to focus on his studies without the stress of working." I stood frozen in the hallway, a physical pain blooming in my chest. They were planning to pay fully for Kyle what they had only partially paid for me. The differences in our academic performances, our responsibilities, our treatment. It all crystallized in that moment. I never confronted them about it. What would be the point? Instead, I doubled down on my independence. I took on more student loans. I worked 30 hours a week at a coffee shop near campus. I stayed for summers to save on housing costs, only coming home for brief visits. By graduation, I had a degree in graphic design, a portfolio of work I was proud of, and $45,000 in student loan debt. The job market was brutal that year. Despite my excellent grades and internship experience, full-time positions were scarce. I freelanced, picking up projects where I could, but it wasn't enough to cover both living expenses and my loan payments. With crushing reluctance, I called my parents. Would it be possible for me to move back home just until I can build up a more stable client base? There was a pause on the line before my mother answered. "Of course, sweetheart. This is still your home." So, at 26, I moved back into my childhood bedroom, swallowing my pride and trying to see it as a strategic move, not a failure. I promised myself it would be temporary. Just until I got on my feet. Just until I had enough saved to make it on my own. Little did I know that this decision would lead to the final breaking point, the moment that would change everything about my relationship with my family. After moving back home, I threw myself into building my career as a freelance graphic designer. I worked constantly, taking any project I could get my hands on, no matter how small the pay. Logos for new businesses, wedding invitations for friends of friends, website layouts for local shops. I said yes to everything determined to build a reputation and a client base. My desk in the corner of my childhood bedroom became command central. I'd wake up at 6 a.m., make coffee, and start working before the house was even awake. Often, I'd still be at my computer at midnight, tweaking designs, responding to client emails, or hunting for new opportunities on freelance websites. About 2 months after moving back in, my parents asked to talk to me after dinner. Kyle was out with friends, so it was just the three of us sitting in the living room. The TV turned off, my father clearing his throat in that way he did before making pronouncements. "Brooke," he began, "your mother and I have been talking. You're working now, and we think it would be appropriate for you to contribute to the household expenses." I nodded, having expected this conversation. "That seems fair. What did you have in mind?" "We thought you could cover the utilities and help with groceries," my mother said, "rather than charging you formal rent." It was reasonable. I was using electricity, water, internet. I was eating the food. And they were deliberately not calling it rent, which felt like a kindness. I agreed immediately. "No problem. I can handle that." What they didn't say then, what they wouldn't say until later, was that this arrangement would be dramatically different from what they'd expect from Kyle. Over the next few months, I settled into a routine. Work during the day, occasional dinners with the family, quiet evenings in my room, continuing to work, or talking with Amanda, my best friend since college. She was the only one who truly understood my complicated feelings about my family dynamic. "It's like I'm the designated adult, and Kyle's the perpetual child," I told her during one of our video chats. "And they don't even realize they're doing it." "Have you ever just called them out on it?" Amanda asked, her face serious on my laptop screen. I laughed without humor. "What would I say? Hey, Mom and Dad, why do you love Kyle more than me?" I'd sound like a jealous 5-year-old. Meanwhile, Kyle was finishing his senior year at State University. He was majoring in business administration, maintaining a solid C+ an average, and according to my parents, networking, which seemed to involve a lot of fraternity parties and very little actual career planning. I didn't resent Kyle for this. He was simply playing the game according to the rules our parents had established. Why struggle and stress when charm and minimal effort were rewarded just as much, if not more? May arrived, and with it, Kyle's graduation. My parents were ecstatic, talking about it for weeks beforehand, planning a huge party at the house. My mother asked me if I'd help with the food and decorations given my creative talents, and I agreed. It was easier than arguing, and despite everything, I was proud of Kyle for finishing school. The day of his graduation ceremony, we all dressed up and drove to the university. I sat between my parents in the auditorium, watching as hundreds of names were called. When Kyle Gardner echoed through the speakers, my parents leapt to their feet, cheering wildly. I stood too, clapping and smiling, genuinely happy for my brother, but acutely aware that my own graduation had been marked with much less fanfare. The party afterward was packed with relatives, neighbors, and Kyle's friends. Everyone congratulating him, asking about his plans, pressing gifts and cards into his hands. I moved through the crowd with trays of food, refilling drinks, taking photos when asked. The invisible infrastructure, making everything run smoothly. Later that night, after most of the guests had left, I found myself alone in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher. Amanda called, and I stepped onto the back porch to talk. "How was it?" she asked, knowing exactly what day it was. "Fine. Kyle was happy. Parents were proud. Standard stuff." "And how are you?" I sighed, leaning against the railing. "I don't know, Amanda. I keep telling myself I'm an adult, that I shouldn't need my parents' validation anymore, that I shouldn't compare their treatment of me and Kyle. But it still hurts." "That's because it's unfair, Brooke. It's not in your head. From everything you've told me, they consistently hold you to higher standards while giving Kyle a free pass." "Yeah, but what can I do about it? I'm living in their house. I'm dependent on them right now." "Maybe not for much longer though, right? You mentioned your client list is growing." I nodded, though she couldn't see me through the phone. "It is. I've been saving. I think in another few months I might have enough for a deposit on a small apartment." "That's good. Maybe some distance would be healthy." I didn't know then how prophetic her words would be, or that some distance would come much sooner and more dramatically than either of us anticipated. The morning after Kyle's graduation party, I woke to the sound of excited voices and a car horn honking outside. Groggy and slightly annoyed, I'd been up until 2 a.m. cleaning after the party. I pushed back my curtain to see what was happening. In our driveway sat a gleaming blue Toyota Camry with a massive red bow on the hood, brand new from the looks of it. My father was standing beside it, a set of keys dangling from his fingers. My mother was filming with her phone, and Kyle, still in his pajamas, was jumping up and down like a little kid on Christmas morning. "No way, no way," he kept shouting. "You guys are the best." I watched frozen as my brother hugged our parents, then ran to the car and slid into the driver's seat, running his hands over the steering wheel in awe. My stomach clenched with an emotion I didn't want to name. It wasn't that Kyle didn't deserve a graduation gift. It wasn't even that the gift was expensive. It was the contrast. The glaring, unavoidable contrast to my own graduation 3 years earlier, when I'd received a card with $200 and a pat on the back for my independence. I pulled myself together and went downstairs. I had to be the supportive big sister, the mature one, as always. "Congratulations, Kyle," I called, stepping outside in my pajamas. "What an amazing surprise." Kyle bounded over to me, his face split with a grin. "Brooke, can you believe it? A freaking car! Come check it out." I let him pull me to the vehicle, made all the appropriate admiring comments, smiled for photos, and did my absolute best to ignore the knife twisting in my chest. Later, my mother suggested we all go out for lunch to continue the celebration. As we sat at the restaurant, my parents and Kyle chattering excitedly about the car's features and Kyle's plans for his first road trip, I picked at my salad and tried to participate in the conversation. "So," my father said, turning to Kyle, "your mother and I were thinking, Since you're just starting out, why don't you stay at home for a while? Give yourself time to find the right job, save some money. Kyle's face lit up. Really? That would be awesome. Of course, my mother added, patting his hand. There's no rush. We want you to have a solid foundation before you have to worry about rent and bills. I set down my fork carefully, keeping my face neutral despite the flood of bitterness rising within me. I'd been covering utilities and groceries for months. I'd worked all through college. I'd taken on debt. And here was Kyle being offered a free place to stay with apparently no expectations. That's great, I managed to say. It's tough out there for new grads. My father nodded. Exactly. No need to struggle unnecessarily. The irony of his statement hit me like a physical blow. No need to struggle unnecessarily, unless you're Brooke, apparently. We finished lunch, drove home in separate cars, Kyle insisting on taking his new Camry, and I retreated to my room claiming I had work to finish. In reality, I needed space to process the growing sense of injustice that was threatening to overwhelm me. I tried to focus on a logo design I was working on, but my mind kept drifting back to lunch, to the car, to the years of different standards and expectations. I was still sitting there staring blankly at my computer screen when there was a knock at my door around 5 p.m. Come in, I called, quickly clicking to make it look like I'd been working. My mother opened the door but didn't enter. Dinner will be ready in about an hour. We're having Kyle's favorite to celebrate. Sounds good, I said, forcing a smile. She hesitated, then stepped into the room and placed something on my bed before leaving. I turned to look. It was an envelope. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a printed invoice. At the top in bold letters, monthly rent, $800. Below was a breakdown of utilities and food costs, followed by a new edition, room rental. There was a note at the bottom in my father's handwriting. Starting next month, we can discuss payment arrangements at dinner. I stared at the paper, my vision blurring, my hands beginning to shake. $800. Almost double what I'd been paying for utilities and food. Without warning, without discussion. And on the very same day, they'd given Kyle a new car and told him he could live at home expense-free. I don't remember much about the next hour. I know I cried. I know I paced. I know I called Amanda, who swore vehemently, and offered her couch for as long as you need it. When I finally went downstairs for dinner, my face was carefully composed, though my eyes were still red. Kyle was regaling our parents with plans for a weekend trip with his friends in his new car. No one mentioned the invoice. It wasn't until after we'd eaten as Kyle went to meet friends and my mother started clearing plates that my father finally brought it up. Did you see the information your mother left for you? He asked casually, as if we were discussing the weather. Yes, I said, my voice tight. I saw the rent bill. Bill is such a harsh word, my mother interjected, returning from the kitchen. We just think it's time to formalize our arrangement. By doubling what I've been contributing and calling it rent, I asked, on the same day you gave Kyle a car and told him he could live here for free. My father frowned. That's different. Kyle is just starting out. He needs time to find his footing. And I didn't... My voice was rising now, the control I'd maintained all day slipping. I worked through college. I took out loans. I came back home because the job market was tough and immediately started contributing. How is my situation any different from Kyle's? You're 28, Brooke, my mother said, as if that explained everything. It's time for you to be fully independent. And Kyle, when will it be time for him? My father's expression hardened. We're not going to justify our parenting decisions to you. This is our house, and these are our terms. If you don't like them, you're free to find your own place. The finality of his tone, the dismissal of my feelings, the utter blindness to the double standard, it all crashed over me in a wave. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. You're right, I said, my voice suddenly calm. It is your house, and I think it's time I found my own place. I walked out of the dining room and up the stairs to my bedroom, tears streaming down my face, a decision crystallizing in my mind. I was done. Done trying to earn their approval. Done accepting the disparity in how they treated their children. Done pretending it didn't hurt. If they couldn't see the injustice after all these years, they never would. That night, I made a plan. Not for next month, not for when I'd saved enough. Now. Tonight. As soon as I closed my bedroom door, I pulled out my phone and called Amanda. "I need to take you up on that couch offer," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Tonight, if possible." Amanda didn't hesitate. "Of course. What happened?" I explained the situation. The car, the free ride for Kyle, the sudden rent bill, while pulling my suitcase from under the bed and opening drawers. "Those absolute hypocrites," Amanda fumed. "Pack your stuff. My couch is your couch for as long as you need it." "I don't want to impose." "Stop. You're not imposing. This is what friends are for. And frankly, you should have left that toxic environment ages ago." She was right, of course. I'd stayed too long hoping for recognition that never came, making excuses for behavior that was inexcusable. I looked around my childhood bedroom, really seeing it for the first time in years. The walls still held posters from my college days. Bookshelves crammed with textbooks and novels. The desk where I'd been working so hard to build a career while living in limbo. This wasn't home anymore. Maybe it hadn't been for a long time. I began sorting through my belongings with ruthless efficiency. Clothes I needed immediately went into the suitcase. Important documents, birth certificate, social security card, passport, went into my messenger bag along with my laptop and external hard drives containing all my work files. Everything else could wait. I heard my parents moving around downstairs, the murmur of their voices, the sound of the TV being turned on. Normal evening sounds that suddenly felt alien. Kyle had gone out with friends to celebrate his car, which was a relief. I didn't want him involved in this. As I packed, my mind raced through logistics. I had about $3,000 in savings, not enough for a proper apartment deposit in our area, but enough to contribute to Amanda's household expenses while I looked for something permanent. I had several ongoing client projects that would bring in income. I could make this work. Around midnight, I heard my parents go to bed. Their door closed, and soon after my father's familiar snoring rumbled down the hallway. I continued packing, moving quietly now. By 1 a.m., I had sorted through everything, separating what I would take now from what could be retrieved later or simply left behind. Then I sat at my desk and began to write. The note started as a simple goodbye, an explanation of where I'd gone. But as I wrote, years of unspoken feelings poured out. I listed specific instances of the double standards, the different expectations, the unequal support. I detailed exactly how much I had paid for my own education versus what they were covering for Kyle. I calculated the utilities and grocery expenses I'd been covering for months. I wasn't just angry, I was hurt. Deeply, persistently hurt by the knowledge that my parents saw me as somehow less deserving of their support and generosity than my brother. And I told them so in clear, unemotional language. I concluded with, "I don't expect you to suddenly realize how unfair this has been. I don't even expect an apology, but I do need you to understand that I am removing myself from this dynamic. I deserve better than to be treated as a tenant in what should be my home while Kyle receives unconditional support. I deserve better than to work myself to exhaustion trying to earn approval that comes so easily to him. I am not angry at Kyle. This isn't his fault. But I am disappointed in you both for failing to see the damage your favoritism has caused. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. Please respect my decision and don't try to contact me until then. Brooke." I read it over twice, making sure it expressed exactly what I needed to say. Then I placed it on my perfectly made bed, right next to the rent invoice they'd left for me. At 2 a.m., I carried my suitcase and bags downstairs, careful to avoid the third step from the bottom that always creaked. I took one last look around the darkened house, memories flashing through my mind, Childhood birthdays, holiday dinners, homework at the kitchen table. Not all of it had been bad, but it wasn't enough to keep me here diminishing myself to fit their expectations. I closed the front door quietly behind me, loaded my car, and drove away from the house I'd grown up in, tears streaming down my face. There was pain, yes, but also a surprising sense of liberation. For the first time in years, I was making a choice solely for myself, not to please anyone else. The streets were empty at that hour, streetlights creating pools of yellow glow on the pavement. I drove carefully, wiping tears with one hand, until I reached Amanda's apartment building across town. She was waiting for me despite the hour coming out to help with my bags. When everything was inside, she hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "This took courage." I nodded against her shoulder, too exhausted and emotional to speak. "The couch is made up," she said, pulling back. "We'll figure everything else out tomorrow." I collapsed onto her couch, physically and emotionally drained. The last thought before sleep claimed me was that for the first time in my adult life, I had put myself first. And despite the pain, it felt right. The first week at Amanda's apartment was a blur of emotions and practicalities. I turned off my phone for the first 3 days, unable to face the inevitable barrage of calls and messages from my family. Instead, I focused on work, taking comfort in the familiar routines of design and client communication. Amanda's one-bedroom apartment was small but cozy, with just enough room for her furniture and my temporary sleeping space on the couch. She worked as a marketing coordinator for a local company, leaving the apartment to me during the day. In the evenings, we'd cook together and talk, her steady presence a balm to my raw emotions. "Have you thought about what you'll say when you do talk to them?" she asked on the 4th night as we sat eating takeout Thai food. I pushed noodles around my plate. "Not really. Part of me doesn't want to talk to them at all. Another part knows that's not realistic or healthy." "Maybe give yourself some time before making any decisions," Amanda suggested. "You've been carrying this for years. A few weeks of space won't hurt." I nodded, grateful for her understanding. "I need to start apartment hunting too. I can't crash on your couch forever." "There's no rush," Amanda said firmly. "But I did see a for rent sign on that complex near the park. We could check it out this weekend if you want." On day 5, I finally turned my phone back on. It immediately lit up with notifications. 12 missed calls from my mother, 8 from my father, 23 text messages from both of them, ranging from confused to worried to angry. There were also 5 calls from Kyle, which surprised me. His text messages were different from our parents. "Brooke, where are you? Mom and Dad are freaking out." "They showed me your note. I had no idea you felt that way. Please, just let me know you're safe. Can we talk? Just you and me? I miss you, sis." His last message made me tear up. Despite everything, I didn't blame Kyle for the situation. He was as much a product of our parents' unequal treatment as I was, just on the more favorable side. I sent him a brief reply. "I'm safe, staying with Amanda. Need some time. We'll call you soon." Then I blocked my parents' numbers. It was a temporary measure, I told myself, just until I was emotionally ready to engage with them. The weekend brought an unexpected development. I was working on a logo design when there was a knock at Amanda's door. She was out grocery shopping, so I answered, assuming it was a package delivery. Instead, Kyle stood there looking uncertain and a little lost. "How did you know where to find me?" I asked, stunned. "Process of elimination," he said with a small smile. "You weren't at any of the usual places. Amanda's was my best guess." I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. We stood awkwardly in Amanda's small living room, the evidence of my temporary residence. Blankets folded on the couch, my laptop on the coffee table, between us. "Mom and Dad are pretty upset," he finally said. "I imagine they are." "They showed me your note." He looked directly at me, his expression serious. Brooke, I had no idea about any of it. The different expectations, the money stuff, how you felt. I just thought that's how things were. The simple honesty in his voice broke through some of my defenses. It's not your fault, Kyle. I never talked about it. Not with you anyway. But I should have seen it, he insisted. I'm not blind or stupid. I think I didn't want to see it because it benefited me. His self-awareness surprised me. The Kyle I knew was carefree and sometimes self-centered, a product of our upbringing certainly, but not someone I expected this level of reflection from. What happened after I left? I asked, gesturing for him to sit on the armchair while I perched on the edge of the couch. Kyle ran a hand through his hair. It was intense. Mom found your note first in the morning. She started crying, called Dad upstairs. I heard them arguing. Dad was saying you were overreacting. Mom was saying maybe they'd pushed too hard. And what do you think? I couldn't help asking. He was quiet for a moment. I think they've always treated us differently. I just never realized how much it hurt you. He paused. I did something you should know about. What? I sold the car. I stared at him. You what? The Camry. I sold it back to the dealership. Took a hit on the value, but I got most of it back. Kyle, why would you do that? He shrugged, looking uncomfortable. It didn't feel right to keep it. Not after reading what you wrote. About how you paid your own way through college while they're covering mine. About the rent invoice. I didn't know what to say. Of all the reactions I'd anticipated, Kyle selling his graduation gift hadn't been on the list. They're different now, he continued. Since you left, Dad's been quiet, which is weird for him. Mom keeps going into your room and coming out with red eyes. I think it really got to them. I felt a complicated mix of emotions, vindication that they were finally seeing the impact of their behavior, guilt about causing pain, surprise at Kyle's actions. I'm not coming home, I said firmly. Not yet anyway. I need some space to figure things out. Kyle nodded. I get that, but would you be willing to meet with them? Maybe neutral ground like a coffee shop or something? They really want to talk to you. I considered his request. Part of me wanted to refuse to maintain the boundary I'd established, but another part recognized that real resolution would require communication. Maybe, I said finally. But not yet. I need more time. Kyle looked relieved. That's fair. I'll tell them. He stood up, hesitating before adding, I'm sorry, Brooke, for not seeing it sooner, for being part of the problem. I stood too impulsively, pulling him into a hug. You weren't the problem, Kyle. You're my brother, and I love you. This is between me and Mom and Dad. He hugged me back tightly. I love you too. And for what it's worth, I think you're the strongest person I know. Always have been. After he left, I sat on Amanda's couch processing the conversation. Kyle's visit had shifted something inside me. The anger was still there, but it felt less consuming. And for the first time, I allowed myself to consider that maybe, just maybe, my parents might actually hear me this time. 2 weeks after I left home, I finally agreed to meet with my parents. Kyle had been texting me updates, letting me know they were respectful of my request for space, but eager to talk. Amanda helped me prepare emotionally, sitting through practice conversations and reminding me that I had every right to my feelings. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory, public enough that no one would make a scene, but with corner tables that offered enough privacy for a difficult conversation. I arrived first, deliberately choosing a table and ordering a latte to steady my nerves. When my parents walked in, I was struck by how tired they looked. My mother's eyes were puffy, my father's normally impeccable posture slightly stooped. They spotted me and approached cautiously as if I might bolt. Brooke, my mother said, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you for meeting us. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. They sat down across from me, ordered their drinks, and for a moment, we all sat in uncomfortable silence. My father cleared his throat. We read your note. Several times, actually. Good, I said simply. Sweetheart. My mother began reaching across the table. I kept my hands wrapped around my coffee mug, and she withdrew. We had no idea you felt this way, that you saw things this way. I find that hard to believe, I replied, working to keep my voice steady. The evidence was pretty clear. Perhaps to you, my father said, but He seemed to be struggling with words unusual for a man who argued cases for a living. I thought we were preparing you for the real world, teaching you independence. I thought we were doing right by you. By holding me to higher standards than Kyle, by making me pay my own way while covering his, by giving him a car when he graduated while handing me a rent bill. The bitterness I'd tried to contain seeped into my voice. My mother wiped tears from her eyes. When you list it like that, it sounds terrible. And I can see now that it was. But Brooke, please believe that we never intended to hurt you or make you feel less valued. Intentions don't change the impact, I said, echoing something my therapist had told me years ago when I'd briefly sought counseling in college. Do you have any idea what it's like to grow up feeling like you have to earn the love and support that your sibling gets unconditionally? My father flinched. No, I don't, and I'm sorry. The words seemed to cost him something to say, his pride visibly crumbling. You're right. We've treated you and Kyle differently. I think I convinced myself it was because you were stronger, more capable, that you didn't need the same support he did. Everyone needs support, Dad. Being capable doesn't mean I didn't need or deserve your help. I know that now, he said quietly. Your note. It was like seeing our family through your eyes for the first time. It wasn't a pleasant view. My mother reached for a napkin to dab at her eyes. We've talked about nothing else since you left. About all the ways we failed you. The different rules, the different expectations. Kyle told us he sold the car. I nodded. He told me. That was his decision, my father said. We didn't ask him to do it, but I respect him for it. We want to make this right, my mother continued. Whatever that looks like. We love you, Brooke. We've always loved you, even if we've done a terrible job of showing it. I took a sip of my coffee, buying time to organize my thoughts. Part of me had expected denial, defensiveness, minimizing. Their apparent willingness to accept responsibility was disarming. I don't know if this can be made right, I said finally. There are years of patterns here. Years of feeling like the family workhorse while Kyle was the golden child. That doesn't disappear with one conversation? No, it doesn't. My father agreed, surprising me again. And we're not asking for immediate forgiveness. We're asking for a chance to do better, to rebuild our relationship on more equal footing. What would that look like to you? I asked, genuinely curious about their vision. They exchanged glances. We've been discussing that, my mother said. For starters, we've told Kyle that the same rules apply to him now. If he wants to continue living at home, he needs to contribute, not as punishment for him, but because it's the fair thing to do. We'd also like to help you with your student loans, my father added. We paid for Kyle's education. We should have done the same for you. The offer was unexpected. I'd been carrying the weight of those loans for years, resenting every payment while knowing my brother would graduate debt-free. I don't want your money, I said automatically, then paused. Was that true? Or was it pride speaking? At least not right now. This isn't about evening the financial score. Then what is it about? My father asked, not confrontationally, but with what seemed like genuine desire to understand. It's about recognition, about acknowledging the pattern and committing to change. It's about me knowing that if I ever come back into your lives in a meaningful way, it will be different. We want that too, my mother said earnestly. We've even started seeing a family therapist to help us understand how we got here. We're hoping, maybe someday, you might join us for a session. Again, I was caught off guard. My parents seeing a therapist. My father who considered psychology soft science at best. It was hard to imagine. I'll think about it, I said, not ready to commit, but touched by the effort. But right now I need to focus on establishing my own life. I'm looking for an apartment, building my business, working on myself. Of course, my father said. You need space and time. We understand that. Where are you staying now? My mother asked tentatively. With Amanda, but it's temporary. I didn't elaborate on my housing search, maintaining some boundaries. As our coffees grew cold, we talked more. About my work, about Kyle, about neutral topics that felt safer than diving deeper into decades of family dynamics. It wasn't resolution, not by a long shot, but it was a beginning. A first step on what would clearly be a long road. When we finally stood to leave, my mother asked, "Can I hug you?" Her voice was small, uncertain. I hesitated, then nodded. She embraced me gently, as if afraid I might break or run. My father stood awkwardly to the side until I extended an arm to include him. The three of us stood there, a fragile family constellation, trying to find a new configuration. "We love you, Brooke," my mother whispered. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe her. Over the following months, I rebuilt my life piece by piece, creating a foundation based on my own terms, rather than anyone else's expectations. 2 weeks after meeting my parents at the coffee shop, I found a small, one-bedroom apartment near the city center. It wasn't fancy, just 600 square feet with outdated appliances and creaky floors. But it was mine. Amanda helped me move in, bringing along a few houseplants as a housewarming gift that won't die if you forget to water it for a week. We spent that first evening sitting on cushions on the floor, eating pizza, and drinking cheap wine, celebrating my independence. "How does it feel?" Amanda asked, gesturing around the mostly empty space. "Your own place, on your own terms." I looked around at the bare walls, waiting for artwork at the single lamp, casting a warm glow at the possibilities stretching before me. "It feels right," I said simply, "like I can breathe." My freelance design business began to flourish, partly because I was channeling more energy and focus into it now that I wasn't managing family dynamics. I landed a contract with a small but growing skincare brand, creating their entire visual identity from logo to packaging to website. The owner, impressed with my work, referred me to other businesses in her network. For the first time, I was making enough money to cover all my expenses, contribute to my savings, and even make extra payments on my student loans. The financial independence was exhilarating after years of struggling and penny pinching. My relationship with my family evolved in fits and starts. True to their word, my parents had continued seeing a therapist both individually and together. Kyle told me during one of our regular lunch dates that our father had broken down during a session, admitting that he'd projected his own father's high expectations onto me, while protecting Kyle from the pressure he himself had felt as a young man. "It was intense," Kyle said, picking at his sandwich. "I've never seen Dad cry before. Never even seen him close to it." I took a moment to absorb this information. My grandfather had been a stern, achievement-oriented man who died when I was 12. I had vague memories of him praising my report cards while showing little interest in Kyle's finger paintings or t-ball games. The generational pattern hadn't occurred to me before. "How are things at home?" I asked Kyle. We'd fallen into a routine of meeting every week or two, deliberately maintaining our sibling relationships separate from our parents. He shrugged. "Different. I'm paying rent now, which feels weird but fair. Mom asks about you all the time, but tries not to be pushy about it. Dad's quieter. More reflective, I guess." After about 3 months, I agreed to attend a family therapy session. It was uncomfortable at first, sitting in a neutral office with a gentle-voiced therapist guiding us through conversations we should have had years ago. My father struggled to articulate his feelings, falling back on logical arguments before catching himself. My mother cried often. I fluctuated between defensive walls and raw vulnerability. But slowly, session by session, we began to understand each other better. I learned that my mother had always admired my independence, never realizing she was pushing me to be self-sufficient to my own detriment. My father admitted that he'd seen so much of himself in me, that he'd held me to impossible standards, both as preparation for the world and as some misguided form of connection. "I thought you could handle it," he said during one particularly breakthrough session. "I thought you were like me, needing to be pushed to excel. It never occurred to me that what you might have needed instead was just support, unconditional support." "That's exactly what I needed." I confirmed, my voice steady despite the tears in my eyes. "What everyone needs." 6 months after leaving home, I invited my parents to my apartment for dinner. It was the first time they would see where I lived the life I had built for myself. I spent the day cleaning, arranging flowers, preparing a simple but elegant meal. Not to impress them, I realized as I worked, but to show them, and myself, that I was thriving. They arrived right on time, my mother carrying a small gift bag, my father looking uncomfortable in the unfamiliar setting. I gave them a quick tour, which took all of 2 minutes, given the apartment's size. "It's lovely," my mother said, admiring the gallery wall of prints I'd collected and framed. "So much light." "It suits you," my father added, surprising me. "Efficient, but warm. Like you." We sat down to dinner, and for the first time in memory, the conversation flowed without underlying tension. They asked about my work with genuine interest. I asked about their lives. We carefully avoided old patterns, my father catching himself when he started to make a comment about proper career paths, my mother stopping herself from comparing my cooking to Kyle's. As we were finishing dessert, my mother slid the gift bag across the table. "It's not much," she said. "Just something we thought you might like." Inside was a small framed photo I'd never seen before. Me at about 5 years old, gap-toothed and beaming, holding up a drawing I'd made. My father was kneeling beside me, looking at the artwork with undisguised pride. "Where did this come from?" I asked, studying the image. "Your elementary school art show," my mother explained. "I was going through old photo albums and found it. I thought it might remind you that there were good moments too. That beneath everything that went wrong, there was love." I ran my finger over the glass over my father's younger face, looking at my childhood creation as if it were a masterpiece. "Thank you," I said simply. As they were leaving, my father paused at the door. "I'm proud of you, Brooke," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Not because of what you've achieved, though, that's impressive. I'm proud of who you are, of your strength in standing up for yourself, even when it was against us. Especially then." The words I'd waited so long to hear finally spoken without conditions or comparisons. "Thank you, Dad," I said, accepting the compliment for what it was. A step toward healing. A year passed since the night I left my parents' house, leaving behind nothing but a note that changed everything. In that year, I'd built a life that reflected my own values and choices rather than someone else's expectations. My design business had grown from freelance gigs to a small agency with 2 part-time employees helping me manage the workload. I'd moved to a larger apartment, one with an actual office space, instead of a desk crammed into the corner of my living room. I'd made the final payment on my student loans, a milestone I celebrated with Amanda by opening a bottle of champagne that was definitely too expensive for the occasion. But the most profound changes weren't external. They were in how I saw myself, how I moved through the world, how I established and maintained boundaries. I no longer felt the need to prove my worth through constant achievement. I no longer accepted unequal treatment as my due. I had found my voice, and with it a sense of peace I'd never known before. My relationship with my family had evolved too. Through therapy, both individual and as a family, we'd begun to unpack decades of patterns and expectations. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, still times when old dynamics threatened to resurface. But there was awareness now, and willingness to acknowledge when things went sideways. Kyle had found his footing too. After 6 months of living at home and paying rent, he'd moved into an apartment with a friend and secured a job at a marketing firm. He called me regularly for advice, both professional and personal, and our sibling relationship had grown stronger, without the shadow of parental favoritism looming over us. I never realized how much I relied on Mom and Dad to smooth the way for me, he told me during one of our dinner meetups. Having to figure things out on my own, it's harder, but it feels better. More real. I smiled, recognizing the growth in him. Welcome to adulthood, little brother. My parents had changed as well. My father, once rigid in his expectations and views, had developed a capacity for self-reflection that continued to surprise me. My mother had become more direct in her communication, less likely to enable problematic behaviors in the name of keeping peace. We now had Sunday dinner together once a month, a tradition we'd started 6 months after my departure, when the rawness had begun to heal. Sometimes at their house, sometimes at my apartment, occasionally at a restaurant. The location mattered less than the intention to maintain connection without falling back into unhealthy patterns. At today's dinner, held at my place, my mother raised her glass. I'd like to make a toast, she said, to Brooke and the courage it took to show us what we couldn't see for ourselves. My father nodded, raising his glass as well. And to new beginnings. Kyle added, and to family. The one we're creating now, not the one we had before. I looked around at their faces, these people who had hurt me and loved me in equal measure, who were trying so hard to do better, to be better. The journey hadn't been easy for any of us. There had been painful conversations, tears, moments when it seemed easier to walk away than to push through to understanding. But we had persisted, and in that persistence found a new way to be family. You know, I said, setting down my glass, someone asked me recently if I regret leaving the way I did, if I wish I'd tried talking to you first instead of disappearing in the night with just a note. What did you tell them? My father asked, his expression careful. I said no. I don't regret it. I needed that clean break to find my own strength. And honestly, I'm not sure you would have heard me if I'd tried to explain while still living under your roof, still caught in the old dynamic. My mother nodded slowly. I think you're right. We were too comfortable with the way things were, too blind to the inequality we'd created. Sometimes, Kyle added, you have to shake people awake. I smiled at his phrasing. Exactly. And leaving that note, it was my earthquake. My way of saying, see me, really see me. And you finally did. Later, after they'd gone home and I was cleaning up, I found myself thinking about the journey of the past year. The pain and liberation of that night I drove away. The months of rebuilding. The slow, careful reconstruction of family bonds on more equal footing. I thought about other people out there trapped in similar dynamics. The responsible ones, the capable ones, the ones who keep showing up despite never receiving their due. The ones who believe that if they just work hard enough, achieve enough, give enough, they'll finally earn the love and recognition that should be freely given. To them, I would say this. Your worth is not measured by what you accomplish or how much you sacrifice. Your worth is inherent. And sometimes standing up for yourself means walking away even from people you love, even when it breaks your heart to do it. I had left without a word that night, but the note I left behind had said everything I needed to say. It had changed everything. For my parents, for Kyle, for me. It had been the catalyst for a pain we needed to feel, a reckoning. We needed to have a transformation we couldn't have imagined. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is simply to tell your truth and walk away, trusting that if love is real, it will find a way to rebuild on stronger, more equal ground. I'm grateful every day that in my case, it did. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to stand up for yourself, even when it meant potentially hurting people you care about? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength through life's challenges. Remember, sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most healing. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it gives courage to anyone facing similar struggles.